Hi, and welcome to Rethink HR. And today's topic is 5 innovative HR strategies from around the world. I'm Marc Wolfe, author of Yeah, But Cut Through the Noise to Live, Learn, and Lead Better. I'm an executive coach and strategy consultant, and I'm here with Tyler Marcus, who is the CEO of Gradmor. It's a workforce intelligence company. And the reason we put this LinkedIn Live on is because we think there's so many topics that involve people, not just HR, but so many different topics. And if we don't start rethinking how to interact with people and how to go and be able to do things differently as things change, we think that people get left behind, organizations get left behind. So Tyler and I, because of our experience and the people that we've worked with, we're taking the time to be able to provide this insight, but we want lots of feedback. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from comments. We do get comments when we're having other conversations online, and we take that to bring that up. So today we're going to talk about things from around the world. So Tyler, there are so many things that we're doing in the United States. Why even look anywhere else in the world? Aren't we the best at everything?
That's a great question. So I think, yes, like obviously, we believe in our work culture in the US. And I think it's important that we look at how, we were very good about internalizing what can we do to improve work-life balance. AI and HR, right? We're very much focused on when we think about business media and the things that we get inundated in, there's always tends to be a general theme that we focus on. This year, it's been AI, right? That's been a primary thing. Last year was about going back to the office. Should you go back to the office? Should you be in hybrid? Should it just be remote? What does that mean? What does that debate? How does that look? Right. So there's always a different theme. The problem is that we tend to focus on what's in the US and we tend not to look beyond that. Yet there might be innovative top strategies and techniques that can be applied that are completely different that can push us forward even more. And there are different strategies in different countries that are making a difference or making either work more enjoyable, productive, safer, developing skills while also, being on the job that might drive and might be innovative and can be applied potentially within your organization. So this is just more about bringing this to your attention because I feel like that business media in the US doesn't give enough attention to the world when it comes to these types of strategies and how it could be applied and how it can be executed.
So there's things around the world that our media is not covering. So we're doing a service by actually doing some research. And we know our audience, there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that follow an RSVP, and there's also lots of other large organizations. We know that there's a lot of things that you're already doing, that you're doing well. But to Tyler's point, it's not always really promoted as much in the mainstream about what some of these things are. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about some of these things that really are being used and what can we adopt here, even in small doses.
Totally. And just for a quick disclaimer, like these are not strategies that the whole country uses. These are just strategies that we found from the country. So when we talk about strategy, it's not like every single company in there uses it. It's just that it's something that we thought was innovative from specific companies in the world. So topic number one is from Sweden, and it's the idea of a 6-hour workday. And this speaks to the productivity, to identifying ways to be more productive. So some companies in Sweden focus on working 6 hours a day instead of 8. And the whole idea is that if you could be more productive within 6, why have an 8-hour workday? They found that sometimes people tend to waste time on an 8-hour worday, making them less efficient. No, never took a coffee, never took that half hour on social media, or took an hour on their phone in the middle of the day. So it's more of like a concentrated effort. So this was about increasing productivity, and companies that actually do this there have seen more productive workforce, happier workforce, and a more focused workforce within 6 hours. Now, I find personally that when you work 6 hard hours, if you work 6 hard hours, after that, it's like you're good. When it has 8, that's where we get this sort of like, I'm working and then you get tired. So I wonder if there is some sort of like human element to our stamina in how much we could focus, in an office. And my question to you, Marc, is, how do you think this impacts us with like working remotely? Because I find that can also be draining. And number two, do you think this is something that could be adaptable within the US work culture at all?
Yeah, it's interesting because I know some people are thinking right away. They're going, well, I'm lucky if I get 4 good hours out of somebody that I pay for 8 hours worth of work. Now, what we're talking about is actually focused work. We're talking about that you're supposed to be, there's measurables, there's metrics, there's things to get done. And, Tim Ferriss wrote a long time ago about the 4-hour work week, right? So we're talking about efficiency, not just seeing somebody at a desk for 8 hours, not just saying, hey, you have to do 8 hours of work because that's what we're used to. It's more about measuring outcomes and output instead of just doing work. So when you think about remote, like you brought up, and even now between hybrid and now people coming back to the office, the thing is, what we learned, I think, the most is that people can do work in different environments. Some people do it better, and some people know when to take breaks and actually come back and be more productive. So we're going to start seeing, and we already have, where it's about the outcomes, not the working so many hours straight that are doing it. And to your point, Tyler, there is an ineffectiveness or diminishing returns at a certain amount of hours. There's been studies where people that work 50 or 60 hours, how the additional hours that are worked actually produce poorer results, lead to more burnout, and lead to continuation of really disengagement because people don't want to be able to do that. They have no life outside of that. So actually having work-life balance like this can actually make people already feel like there's some hope for them because they know there's work being able to be done.
Yeah, I think the key is making sure that within those 6 hours it's like pretty focused. I think our work culture in the US is with the 8 hours has always been like hammered ever since like back in the Industrial Revolution, right? It's like Monday through Friday, 8 hours. Like I work my 40-hour week, and it's so ingrained in our culture for so long. I mean, we're talking hundreds of years now at this point of, hey, this is the way it's been forever. Is it shifting to 6 hours? What does that look like? Is it okay, within those 6 hours, I'm going to work extremely hard and know that, or not? And I think that's where there might be some discrepancy, is kind of shifting culture and taking, because we're so used to it. We're so used to that system.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's I guess as we kind of look at this point before we move on to the next one with some other countries, is that I think if you start measuring output, right? So some people use OKRs, some people use KPIs. There's a lot of different ways to measure output, but you got to understand we're working with humans, and there's always more work that needs to get done. And the part that gets lost, and a lot of stuff when I teach and when I work with clients for executive coaching, it's about there's making sure you communicate it, making sure it's done in a way where people feel involved and they're not just told what to do, and to make sure that whatever it is, it's clearly defined. You can have 8-hour work weeks, right, where you just work an hour and a half a day, and you could be more productive in some instances than if you worked 8 hours a day, right? It's just making sure what the expectations are. And I think we miss that a lot in the United States because we're like, you got to work so many hours, got to get certain things done. There's always more work to do. Stop, stop slacking. Get to it.
Yeah, and just one last point before we move on to the next one. I worked with a company that had about like 100 recruiters and they were trying to figure out they were rating their productivity. So they had a productivity software that was measuring how many hours a week they were working and on what. And the performance, like, yes, if you worked a certain amount of hours a day, they found that like the average person was working about 5 hours, like 5 hours of work, while the other time was being spent either, doing personal stuff, whatever. The difference between performance wasn't the amount of hours, it was where they were doing within that time. So it's more about this, again, maybe it changes the focus away from how many hours you're working and what you're working on within that time, and working on the most efficient things that are most productive. I think that's a key takeaway here. All right, number 2. In Germany, they have what's called the dual system. Okay, so what does that mean? Now, what is a dual system? It's a difference between, it's not an internship program. So in the US, you're very much focused on, you do school, in the summer you do internships, okay, and then you go back to school. In Germany, they have partnerships with universities and companies, not just for manufacturing, because I know in the US we could talk about that, like the apprenticeships and things like that. They do that here. But with all types of different, in software, everything, where you go to school for 2-3 days, and then the other 2-3 days, you actually work at the company. So let's say you're a software engineer, you go to school and you learn computer science, and you learn liberal arts, and you do all that stuff. And then the other 2 days, you're actually working in the company. So it acts as like a recruitment funnel for talent. So when they actually officially graduate the school, they go into that 5 days. So this is a much closer or much tighter marriage between the two. So I'm curious, Marc, like what do you think about that type of situation, and how that can change recruitment or hiring for companies within Europe?
So a lot of companies now, I mean, in the past, right? So like Mike say, our grandparents' time, there used to be this whole, you bring somebody up, there's an apprentice, you mentor, you work with them, there's hours and years of working with them, and they learn a skill and a trade. And that disappeared for a while, right? And we haven't had that. And now there's people retiring now. So there's people at power plants and a lot of manual labor jobs and a lot of craft jobs that aren't going to be filled again because there's not people to do that. Well, the closest thing we have in the United States is like a co-op where somebody's doing it, or certain magnet schools where somebody goes to work on certain few days and then they do this. The thing is that there's even a lot of organizations, a lot of large companies that actually have programs that go and get college students. So either to be a mechanic or to be able to do things, and they feed it right into the school. What we're seeing is that that's just so seldom, and it's done where it's not really as attractive because people don't realize you can make a lot of money in Tennessee. There's a degree here in cement, right? And being able to, so that's every building that gets done. You can have 6 figures coming out of school. People don't realize what they don't realize. So I think programs like this in Germany, where you actually get to experience it and be able to do that and be able to know you have a job, that's a game changer and really could change a lot of things worldwide.
Yeah, I also think like the US has this thing where like we have like the trades are here, and then we have liberal arts, right? We have arts and science schools, right? So when you go to university, like I did, the liberal arts education where you study, history major or you're an English major, a lot of those majors have a hard time transitioning into what career. And I wonder if a dual system could be beneficial in helping them guide to getting the right roles. So for example, if you're a history major, what does that mean? Like, if you don't want to become a history teacher and you don't want to become a history professor, does a dual system help where companies are identifying certain skills that you have? They might be, because I know from liberal arts, like you might be a great problem solver, or you might be really creative in how you think about strategy. Does that lend itself to helping those majors that sometimes get left behind in what they're doing, a way to gain that work experience in a unique way where it's not as clear cut as comp sci or, I'm a mechanic. And I think that's where we fall short, is that there's this disconnection sometimes between those two things. And some people get lost in, okay, I'm studying, I'm really, really book smart. How do I apply that to the real world? And I think doing something like this would actually help that.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and there's so much we could dive into on each one of these. And I know there's going to be lots of questions, and people, like I said, have already tried this. And people with global clients already know they're interacting with some of these people that work this way and already doing these things. The next one that we want to talk about, though, is Denmark. Tell us more about that, Tyler.
Yes. So in Denmark, some companies do what's called a work-life balance audit. Now, this is interesting because I feel like in the US, we're always auditing like our performance, our productivity. How can we be, more efficient? In Denmark, they look at the balance between work and your life as a key to being a happy employee and an engaged employee. So they'll actually do audits within the companies to figure out how they can increase work-life balance. And I feel like here they might think of that as counterproductive. But in reality, that could actually be something interesting in terms of thinking about, okay, not just auditing what we do at work, but how can we better benefit the person in their life so they are happier in general. This is very Baltic, I think, in the sense of like understanding how, thinking about our work as part of our life, and it's intertwined in this like, sort of way. While I feel like a lot of times here we think about like work life. So it's interesting that they take that approach to health and well-being as a way. So Marc, I'm curious what you think about if that's something that we could ever do here, because it seems a stretch in how we think about things here.
Well, it's interesting because this is one of the biggest topics that come up when I work with clients is, why do you work? And I don't mean that accusationally. I'm just like, really understand why you do what you do. Is it to provide for your family? Is it because you feel this passion and you have this gifting to be able to do things? Is it just to sustain life because you need to do something? And knowing where that answer is on the spectrum of how you feel about work really feeds into what your work-life balance is optimal, right? A company shouldn't tell you how to do your work-life balance, but if you don't tell them, they will tell you, right?
Yeah.
They will control your life. They will be doing things because something's going to take that time and own it. So it's interesting that Denmark is aware of this in a way where they're like, it's part of the culture for them to be able to do it because they want employees to understand it's important. And then companies have to do it. So you wouldn't even work at a company that wouldn't think about this if most of your friends and colleagues are already at a company where they're like, we want to make sure that we're checking in and it's balanced and it's not just a pulse survey twice a year. It's really part of the way it's imbibed in the whole way the organization works.
Yeah, and I think also I feel like as generations change here, so I had a great conversation with someone who was like, "Oh, in my generation, like work was just about the paycheck. Like I worked for the paycheck, and that was what mattered to us, right? It was just like, hey, paycheck, benefits." And he was telling me that now, like the new generation that comes in, like that's second to third. It's more about like balance and purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this type of thing in our newer in this generation can actually make a difference, right? So people are more focused on balance than it is just about, oh, I just need a paycheck. And I feel like that's where there could be a change here and that could be implemented more here. I think we see more of this with tech companies where the Googles of the world and the Facebooks where like they're very much about like, balance. Like my friends who work in software engineers at these companies, right? They have more freedom and flexibility in the work-life balance than I've seen, in other types of industries. But I do think as people need to attract talent as in the next generation, they're going to have to think about something like this. Maybe not as serious as Denmark, but I think something around this approach.
And that's a good point. It's like some of these things that they're doing, it's hard to be like, hey, I'm going to go to my boss today as an HR professional, and I'm going to be like, we need to do this because it would be a shock to the system. What it is that there are companies that are actually doing this in a way, but sometimes it's the difference between addressing it realistically and being like, we're doing this because it looks good, it's optics, or is it really because we want to make sure people really live it out? And that's the difference. What we're trying to show you is that these are not just topics it's sexy to put when you list it for hiring that you're like, we do this. It's like, no, they look on Glassdoor, you look at other places and they're like, no, these people are actually legit. They actually live this out. And you can see that they're changing the way they did things so people actually feel like they want to be part of an organization and stay. But
Exactly.
wait, there's more, Tyler. Whoa, we still have two more.
Yeah, we have two more. All right, number 4. We're going to talk about in the Netherlands and how some companies do skills development days. So this is a big L&D topic, right? So they do 4 days of work and 1 day of just developing new skills. I think this is fascinating to me because I think I think our perspective here is that, skills should be done outside of work, right? You develop your skills outside of our work time. Mm-hmm. But some of the companies in the Netherlands say, no, 4 days you work, 1 day you just focus on developing a new skill that pertains to your job that can advance your abilities. This to me is most fascinating because I think here, and maybe you can agree or disagree, Mark, that we take the idea that like if you're learning, you're not like producing. But in my opinion, if you're learning and if you just do 3 hours a week, even of skills development, you're by 6 to 12 months, you're a much better employee and more productive than you were. And that's how I feel. So what do you think about this and how this could be instituted?
So it's interesting. I have a quote that I often remind leaders. I was like, would you rather people stay and not learn and grow? Because what their fear is that they're going to learn, grow, and leave. And I was like, so you'd rather not teach them and they stay instead of actually learning and leaving, and they want to have clawback. So I just talked to somebody recently who was like, but what happens if I pay for an advanced degree or a certification and everything and they leave? And I was like, well, why would they leave you if you're an organization worth staying? And if it's just about the money, then have you really evaluated if you're more than just about the paycheck? Right. So if you know your people, right, in the Netherlands, knowing that people need skills and advancement. And I mean, we could talk about Google a long time ago, used to have people that used to do their own projects. They would take 20% of their time. And that's how Google Voice and all these other products and Gmail came out, because people were working on their own pet projects that became larger projects for the organization. You don't hear about that as much anymore. And I think it's to the point you brought up, which is like, well, if you're learning, I mean, you can't be doing your job. I was like, no, they're actually learning to do their job better. They're learning so they can see things outside their own industry and bring ideas. If you keep treating people like they just have to work and they can't ever learn in work, what you're doing is hoping they continue to learn, and
Yes.
instead of actually making it part of the organizational culture.
And I think that's exactly right. And I think that's the key, because I know L&D with LMS systems, most companies now above a couple hundred employees have an LMS, have a learning development strategy, have courses, right? They paid a lot of money for this software. I mean, there's 600 LMS providers plus in the world. This is not, it's not a new thing. But is it optional to, right? Are you defining, hey, here's 3 hours on Friday morning where this is like your 3 hours to learn? Mm-hmm. I think that's probably going to increase people learning new skills. I mean, I would, just in a sense of like, as opposed to making it optional where people are like, I have work to do. I'm not going to spend 3 hours and learn, this new sales technique or something. I'm just thinking from that perspective. So to me, it's more like allowing the mandate of it, as opposed to being like, hey, we have this system where, you can learn some things, or they just use the LMS for onboarding and then some training. This allows for almost like a deep commitment to new skills. And I think that is key to me.
So you bring up LMS, and so many companies have them. And always what I ask is, I say, so tell me how you can measure that people not have done them with the check marks. Show me the skills that have actually improved the individual and the organization because of it. And there's not a lot of metrics on that a lot of times.
No.
Right? It's just that they completed it. Or they point people and go, there's thousands of courses here. And I asked some of the leaders, I was like, so have you taken the courses? Are you a better leader because you've taken certain courses? They're like, well, they're sometimes very fundamental, or they're not very interactive. So it's not just offering training, because guess what? We have ChatGPT. I can learn anything, or right. I can go and Google things. I mean, it's not about access to information. What it is that if you work in a company in the Netherlands and they're doing this, your peers are also going to be doing this. So if you're the one who doesn't want to learn and you don't want to do it, you're going to be the outlier, versus because everybody else at the company is going to be doing this. That's a cultural move for learning and development, not just everybody has to do it and you're forced to. It's what helps this organization work and be better and learn and grow and not face downturns, because people are always striving to improve.
Yes. And I think a lot of companies here talk about, we want a culture of like growth, of people growing as individuals. But how do you, I think this is a great way to execute it. I think a lot of issues here sometimes is like, there's a lot of talk, and then it's like, but it's hard to execute. And I don't think it's on purpose. I just think it's how we think of it. We get busy and we just focus on the things we need to do. This allows, mandated time or something that does deliver on that. So when you have an interview with somebody, you say, really, your culture is all about, growth and career growth and development. Yeah, well, we do this 3 out skills. At least you could point to something tangible. I think a lot of times we just say, we do that stuff. So I think this kind of allows that. And I also noticed that this allows a person to be flexible in what they want to do, right? If you're a marketer and you want to develop coding skills, which could actually be very beneficial to make landing pages and things like that in a job, or just understanding the technical side of marketing, that to me makes a better marketer. If you're a creative marketer and now technical, that makes a better person. Now you have a person in your company that's extremely valuable, but in multiple skills. And I think this is a great way to do it.
It makes it so. Before we move on, it makes you sticky, like you're saying, right? The more you learn, that's why people hire internally and then let them grow internally, because they know more things. So great point on that.
Yes. Last one. All right. In Singapore, they have safety pods. And this is the most, I think, out there one of our five, in the sense of like, what is that? And Marc, this is one. This one I'm going to let you take the lead on this one actually, because I know this is one
Yeah.
that
So, I mean, people talk about mental health and wellness and about what's going on, but there needs to be a chance for people to actually be able to take a break. And with safety pods, and this is just one take on it, there's ways for you can go and they discuss mental health and be able to have these conversations and as part of organizations. Now, Singapore, like a lot of other cultures, right? It's easy to say, well, that's halfway around the world. The thing is that mental health is an issue, and just offering it part of your health plan is a lot different than it being on site. It actually being something where people can take breaks, and actually have real-time discussions, and it's infused inside the work organization. That's a lot different than, hey, you have access to it. Kind of like learning and development, where you're like, well, you have access to all that. Go ahead and take advantage of it if you want to. If you know that you're not shunned because you have mental health issues, or even something traumatic happened at work that wasn't something major, but to you, it affected you. This is a great way to actually be able to offset the daily work.
Now, this is a great thing. What I've thought about in the NBA, in the NBA basketball teams, most NBA teams now have a person full time who is mental health professional to help the athletes with mental health, because they found that mental health in a high level aligns with performance. And I feel like this kind of touches on that, where if you're really stressed or burned out and your job is in an area where you're working a lot of hours, what happens when people get stressed and burned out? They work worse or they leave, right? And then it's over. This could be a great preventative, where if you're at a moment where you feel stressed or you feel anxious about your job, where you can go and have that conversation without feeling like a stigma around it. And I think, like you said, like a lot of things right now with mental health, like we have like companies now offer, like mental health, through their healthcare benefits and things like that. But just having that, either it's on site or someone that you can go to, that you can be like, yes, I want to talk about how I'm stressed about, what I'm doing with work, and how you could talk through that for an hour. That now might eliminate this buildup, because with mental health, a lot of stuff builds up over time. If you feel burned out one week, and then the next week and the next week, at some point you're mentally just shut down. So I think taking that, what I've seen in the US here is that if professional teams are doing that, right, in sports to increase performance, companies can do the same and allow for a better and allow for a more productive, more retained workforce, and a happier workforce in the end, in that sense.
You bring up one thing, and as we come to the kind of bottom of the hour here, it's interesting how we know with professional athletes, they need rest between games, no matter what sport, right? They need to recuperate. They have people that, take their role, right? So they'll have second stringers come in sometimes to give them rest. We don't do that in the United States, right? So what we do is we work people, then we work them more, then we don't give them breaks, then we work them more, and we want them to be at top performance. Now, people might not think they're elite athletes, but think about it. If you're going to work somebody to the point where they're mentally and physically exhausted, how productive are they going to be? Which causes mental health and other issues. And by the way, something that affects someone else may not affect you, but not everybody's you.
Yes.
So as we kind of close this up, we like to bring up topics every month that we think are interesting, and we get a lot of feedback from people that they do enjoy it, plus the hundreds of signups that we get for this. But we really want to be able to involve you more. So if you want to have an opportunity to be able to submit some questions, some other topics, or even be interviewed, we're happy to be able to do that. We can even do that offline and come back with some of the things that came up from our interview if people that are less inclined to want to do things live. Tyler and I don't mind doing things live, but we know not everybody enjoys that. It would cause a stress event to actually do something live. So we could do it offline and then be able to go and come up with what comes away. But we're not the only experts out there talking about this, so we really want to involve the community as part of this.
Yep. And thanks everyone for attending. And if you have any questions or topics you want to see, just friend me and Marc on LinkedIn. If we're not friends already, send us a message. We're always open to discussions about anything innovative in HR and talent.
Great.
But